We're in the middle of Perek Chaf of Shmuel Bet. It is a challenging Perek, aren't they all? And right at the beginning of the Perek, which really is a spillover from the end of chapter 19, for those who were not with us last week, might be helpful to listen to or watch last week's shir when you have some time. Essentially, David HaMelech returning home after the rebellion of Avshalom. Avshalom is dead. The troops are expecting some kind of jubilation, an expression of jubilation. They're expecting that the king will be happy that the rebellion was put down, and instead he's much aggrieved. We talked about that story, and in his move back to Yerushalayim, the fact that this has sent ripples of stress through the system, the organic unit that is meant to be the Jewish people. And here the conflicts, old conflicts, resurface between the tribe of Yehuda and all the other tribes. And particularly here, what we saw was the decision by David HaMelech to appoint the chief of staff of the rebels. He took in, of all people, Amasa, who was the chief of staff of Avshalom, recalling that Avshalom is a member of the tribe of Yehuda. I don't want to say in good standing, but he was a member of the tribe of Yehuda. He was the son of David HaMelech. Now suddenly, having failed in his rebellion and having been killed by Yoav, the chief of staff of David, David replaces his own chief of staff, Yoav, with Amasa. One could argue, I did try to argue last time, that there was an element of an attempt on the part of David to, number one, bind the wounds of the nation. There had been a civil war. And number two, to put Yoav in his place. He was very clear with his military people, Yoav at the helm of the military, those military echelons, not to lay a hand on Avshalom. And Yoav did. He killed him. So he's replaced. He's replaced, and yet he's, of course, still in the mix. We see in the stories that we learned last time of David returning back to Yerushalayim in the midst of his various interactions with friends, Barzilai Hagiladi, people who are have ingratiated themselves, Siva, people for whom David's relationship has become more clouded, more ambivalent. Case of Mephibosheth ben Yehonatan. And then after all of this, we see the reality of, as part of the return, we have, I said that out of order, Barzilai Hagiladi came after the story with Siva and Mephibosheth, I'm sorry. Then we have the reality that Shivi ben Gera wants to make amends as well in this story. And people from the family, the Ben Surya family, are once again saying, why don't you just kill him? They're always, we just got to take care of business, and matters of life and death seem to just, be rolling off their tongue in a way, each of them in their own right. So that was Avishai ben Surya who suggested that. And you recall that David said, again, what's with you Bnei Tzeruya people? You're always an obstacle to me, that you don't see how many people have been killed. You want to kill more people? That was page 390 in the Koren Tanakh, Shmuel Bet, chapter 19, verse 23. 22 and 23 is that conflict, right? And at the end of chapter 19, and that's where we're going to get to our story for today, was the tension between a personified Ish Yisrael and Ish Yehuda, man of Israel, man of Judea. You already see the way that the language goes. Later on, this will be called Malchut Yisrael, Malchut Yehuda. By the way, oddly enough, of course, Malchut Yehuda, the kingdom of Judea in the book of Kings, is actually Judea plus the tribe of just Yehuda, but Binyamin. Here, chapter 19 going into chapter 20, the conflict for the last time will be between a person from the tribe of Binyamin together with the rest of the tribes against the tribe of Yehuda. Remember what we talked about last time. We won't go into it now again. It's a long enough review already into this year. The fact of the tribe of Yehuda having been the party of David. In Hebron was he anointed, but he nationalized his rule by physically moving from Hebron, where he served for 7.5 years, up to Yerushalayim. Our discussion about whether Yerushalayim is a federal district, or rather, Machloket appears in several places. I referenced last week, and appears in the beginning of Masechet Yuma, that some of us on this call learned together some years ago as the Gemara Shir in the Shul. And the idea that actually Ish Yehuda was not granted any favoritism for most of David's rule. The other tribes, Ish Yisrael, personified in the man of Israel, are aggrieved. How come now the tribe of Judea wants to assert themselves? We're bringing him home. So we talked about the idea that they want to make amends because the tribe of Judea was also the party bosses who hosted Avshalom ben David in Hebron when he was anointed. And when that happens, we realize, wait a minute, they themselves, the tribe of Yehuda, maybe are among the rebels. Now there's this tension between them, but in the space of that tension, in the moment when there's a dialogue going back and forth, it doesn't mean literally there was one man against one man. Yeah, it was missives going back and forth. It was in the air. It was the collapsing of everything into two personified individuals. That's the verses, the psukim here are begin in pasuk mem bet, mem aleph, mem bet, mem gimel, mem dalet. That we saw. And I made the point last time that it's very hard to speak about chapter 20, Perek Chaf. It's not an independent Perek. It's the next pasuk after what happens in Perek Yud Tet. It's literally the next pasuk. It's not a break in the Parshiyot. If you're looking at a Masoretic text, I'm looking here in my Koren Tanakh, page 391. So the bottom line is continuation of the line before. It's not a separate Parshiyah. It's not like it happened later. It was while this was happening. And Visham Nikra Ish Blial, in that place there was, and here some of the Mefarshim pointed out the word Nikra, which could be called, but in this context, the Aleph and Hey are sometimes interchangeable in Hebrew, refers to Nikra like showed up, like a Mikre is a happening. So Visham Nikre or Nikra Ish Blial. Now, I think the Aleph Hey switch is actually not happenstance either. How could it be? But rather the idea that when we read it and we hear it phonetically, someone to ask you, and there Nikra Ish Blial Ushmo Shevam Bichri, you would say, oh, it means that he showed up. He happened to be there at that time. But when you read it, the Ketiv, when you look at it, it actually means, and there was called. There was called a man that was a no goodnik. He was a wicked man, a man full of plots. Ish Blial, Ushmo Sheva ben Bichri Ish, meaning, and he was called. What does it mean? He was called. He was waiting in the wings. He's waiting for his moment to pounce. Recall that in the previous parak, Shimi ben Gera is also from the tribe of Binyamin, and recall that Mephibosheth is also from the tribe of Binyamin. And Tziva, whether he is or he isn't from the tribe of, he works for someone prominent. He's the chief of staff of someone in Shevet Binyamin. So that tension is still there, and it's in the air. And now Vayitka Bashofar, on the top of page 392, he sounds a shofar Vayomer, Ein lanu chelik b'David. We have no portion with David, Lo nachlan b'ven Yishai, and we have no heritage with the son of Yishai. Ish laholav Yisrael. Everybody go back to your tents. Go home. There's nothing here for you. The nation does not. There's nothing here in the national story of the Jewish people with David. Who cares? We're out of here. We're going to do our own thing. Now, Chazal read in this line, everyone go home to your tents, something a little more sinister. Just look with me at the Yalkut Shimoni. This is the Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni is one of the Midrashim. It's actually a later compilation on Shmuel Aleph. When Hashem said to Shmuel back in the day, go listen to what they say and appoint for them a king, Rabbi Shimon Bet Ch says they're not, when the Navi rather declares, they did not despise you, Hashem says to Shmuel, but rather they despise me. So in that language, says Rabbi Shimon Bet Ch, there are three ways in which the Jewish people will come to despise. They will come to despise Malchut Shamayim, the kingdom of heaven, Malchut Beit David, the kingdom of David, and in the binyan of the building of the Beit Mikdash. When was it that three of them happened? It was in the days of Yeravam. In the days of Yeravam ben Nevat, what will be inscribed in the book of Malachim Aleph? Give me a second, that question, 1 second. Vayan Ish Yisrael. Let me make it bigger, actually, it might be easier. Vayan Ish Yisrael. The Ish Yisrael, Vayomer, they said, Ein lanu chelik b'David. We have no share, no portion with the world of David. That's Malchut. It refers to Malchut Shamayim. V'lo nachala b'ven Yishai. We have no heritage in the heritage that is related to the kingdom of David. Ish lo ohalav Yisrael. Everyone should go home to their tents and don't go to the Beit Mikdash. Don't read ohalav. Don't read to your tents, but rather ella le'elohav. Everyone should go not to their tents, but they should go to their gods. It was a call to idolatry, not just a call to go home. Now, when you look at this, I'm coming to your questions just a second. I haven't even read it yet because I'm trying to hold everything together, all different moving parts here. When you look at all of this, you realize that actually David is confronted with a battle cry that right now is a battle cry of a man named Sheva ben Bichri. Fair enough. But sometime soon, sometime later, this exact sentence will be the rallying cry sentence of a later rebel, Yeravam ben Nevat. And that rebel, Yeravam ben Nevat, for those who have not gone through Sefer Malachim Aleph, it's not really any kind of what they call spoiler alert, because we're going to get there within a few weeks, and it's germane to this story now. Yeravam ben Nevat causes the rebellion, or rather is the rebel, who is the first king, self-appointed, essentially. We'll see it's a little more complicated than that, but essentially he's the man who is appointed as the king of Malchut Yisrael. And this is actually a reality that will then be the reality of the rest of all of the story of Tanakh until the end of Bayit Rishon. It's not going to come back. There will not be a repair of that split. So for those who have, by the way, a Koren Tanakh in front of them, open up in Malachim Aleph, chapter 12. You have a full Tanakh, chapter 12, verse 16. I should have put it in the notes. Malachim Aleph, chapter 12, verse 16. And you can see for yourself that actually the speech that not just Yeravam ben Nevat, but who? All of the people will be saying, will be using this exact sentence. I'm reading it for the benefit of those who don't have it in front of them. There's a whole back and forth between the king and the nation. But the line is, Vayar kol Yisrael, ki lo shama hamelech aleihem, vayashivu ha'am et hamelech davar lemor. And the nation of Israel, or rather all of Israel, saw that the king did not listen to them, not for now what they didn't listen to, but there was an argument basically. And the nation sent back to the king the following sentence, quote, Ma lanu chelek beDavid, v'lo nachala beven Yishai le'ohalecha Yisrael. Ata re'ei beitcha David, v'yilech Yisrael le'ohalav. Everyone went home. But you understand why this sentence was the coded language. It was, I think today you would, people would like to use the word dog whistle. I'm not really sure why I was using the word dog whistle, but okay, right? It's the code. When Sheva ben Bichri said this, it was new. But when the people will say it to Rechavam ben Shlomo, they're already rehashing, by the way, this was the line from a book ago. We didn't forget. And when you realize this, you realize that this rebellion, Sheva ben Bichri, though it will be put down, David is not taken down by a rebellion. We know it's not this rebellion either. There are implications here that, not faulting David per se, Khalil, anything like that, but there were unresolved issues that were not resolved, and on a certain level were left unresolved, and that led to an explosion at the time of the death of Shlomo HaMelech, when Rechavam ben Shlomo takes over. The tribe of Yehuda and Binyamin will crown Rechavam ben Shlomo, but 10 tribes will go with Yeravam ben Nevat. At risk of sounding political, I don't mean anything today, but talk about a democratic vote. If they had taken a democratic vote, the majority, whether by popular vote or by electoral colleges, so to speak, then called Shvatim, would have told you Yeravam ben Nevat is the real king, not Rechavam ben Shlomo. What I'm trying to show you is that it was not like sounds like it's about Malachim, but it's really about Shmuel, about Sefer Shmuel. What's going on here is Sheva ben Bichri is, I'm jumping in right now because the time is ripe for a rebellion. I see how the tensions are going. And the next attempt will be under much different circumstances, in as much as it will be on the heels of an extremely successful king who has not only built the Beit HaMikdash, which was the grand goal of Jewish history, but he has also made Israel, Eretz Yisrael, and Malchut Yisrael, then still united, into a powerhouse economically, intellectually, politically. The whole world is converging. This is a much more nascent moment. And now let's see what happens. Pasuk Bet. I'm on page 392. I'm at the top on the second line in the Koren Tanakh. It's chapter 20, Pasuk Bet. Vayal kol ish Yisrael ma'acharei David, acharei Sheva ben Bichri, v'ish Yehuda davku v'malkam min ha'Yarden v'ad Yerushalayim. So at least the way it's portrayed here, and it doesn't have to mean every single person without any stragglers, it means the majority of the people left from following David. And they went after Sheva ben Bichri. I mean, this is now the rebellion after the rebellion. Now, why were they angry? Because they took up arms to fight for David, in large measure. Again, there were people who followed Absalom even then, but many of them went to the battlefield. And the thanks they get is, like the rebels' chief of staff became the new chief of staff of the army. The tribe of Yehuda is, they're asserting themselves. What about the rest of us? So this guy says he'll be our king. We're following him, and they go. That's what it sounds like. Pasuk Gimel would seem like a non sequitur. Let's skip Pasuk Gimel, go to Pasuk Dalid and Hey, and then we'll go back to Pasuk Gimel. Verse 4. Vayomer HaMelech El Amasa Hazek Li Et Ish Yehuda Shloshet Yamim Vata Po Amod. Go get all of the people from Yehuda. Take 3 days to muster the troops, and then come back here. Vayelech Amasa Lahazik Et Yehuda Vayocher Min HaMoed Asher Ye'ado. He goes to sound the alarm, and he's late from the time that was appointed to come on the third day. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Technicality? We'll come back to that. We need to see what's in Pasuk Gimel, though. I skipped it. Because the flow for me is very obviously, there's a rebellion, the people go up north, and the next step is the king says to the chief of staff, we have to put down the rebellion. But that's not Velochen. That's not what happened. Instead, we learn, Vayavo David el Beito Yerushalayim, Vayikach HaMelech 8 Eser Nashim Pilag Shim Asher Hiniach Lishmor HaBayit, Vayitneim Beit Mishmeret, Vayichalkelem, Va'aleihem Lova, Vatiyena Tzrurot Ad Yom Mutan Almenut Chayut. So, you can read the translation. My loose translation goes like this. Point 1, David came home to his house in Yerushalayim. Point two, he took the 10 women who were these concubines that he had left previously to watch his house. That's literally what it says, to guard the house. And he put them into a house under guard, and he sustained them, he fed them, gave them their basic needs, food, clothing. But he did not return to be with any of them. They were, you could say, chained up. They were stuck until the day, they were bound up till the day that they died. They were living widows because officially their husband, David, was alive. But he put them into captivity, basically. They couldn't go home. They couldn't marry anyone else. They were stuck. So I'm throwing it out there. I'd love to hear some theories, what you're thinking about. What does this have to do with anything between these two things? You're arranging the Tanakh. Wouldn't that pasuk fit much better? I don't know, like he came home and then this rebellion happened. But no, it's in the middle here. In the middle of between the rebellion and the sending of the chief of staff. So I'm opening it up. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Rabbi, could it be that he recognized he was wrong leaving them behind, and this was his way of depriving himself of relationships with them? So it's like a teshuvah of sorts?
Good. So anyone want to respond to the idea that he's doing tshuva by doing this? And it still doesn't answer the question of placement right here. Okay.
I have an idea.
Hold on. Helen first. Go ahead, Helen.
Yes.
Shelley, you have to unmute yourself right after, okay? So unmute.
Okay,
Don't forget.
okay.
Yeah. Helen?
A slip of the lip will sink a ship. As they were quasi-wives in some way, they could be a fifth column in some way, and they may be not meaning to, but be dangerous politically, and a slip of the lip could sink a ship. And it was a security plan on his part.
Sadly, though, Helen, it's on their back and with their misery that he's, to Karen's point, making amends or doing something for security. But national concerns, what could we do? Shelley, what do you think?
I think that this and what's going to happen with Amasa right afterwards goes to show that David still isn't really thinking correctly, and he's not doing the right thing. He left women to guard the palace as opposed to he didn't have some men to go with him. He has a reconciliation with Amasa, which could be a very good idea, but the guy doesn't come back in quite 3 days. I mean, who knows what the distances is? Who knows what the conditions are? And he gets upset right away. We're going all the way back to the original sin with Bathsheba, which clouded his judgment, I have to say, for the rest of his reign. And these are just proofs of it.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, Shelley, actually it is in a way still playing out the consequences of the original sin, or sins, plural, right? And we're still in the thick of it, but we still after that question. I'm coming to you in a second, Mishpachat Friedman. Why here? Why now? Say it a little earlier. Say when he came home and then he heard news that Shev ben Bichri had taken these people and they went up north. I'll remind you, I'm going to show you the map in a minute again. Very far north. Larry, Linda, go ahead.
When I heard 10 concubines, 10 tribes, it kind of, resonated that, who has the power and who has control over whom. It just fit
Excellent.
right there.
I'm not aware. I don't know for sure if they were sort of each concubine from another tribe or not, but certainly the number does sound symmetrical to the number of tribes. That's excellent. I hadn't thought of that at all. Great. Yeah. Look, this question, I'm not sure. I think the question might be better than any answer we can propound. But I think all of these are along the lines. I'll show you some of the commentators and the Gemara, the Yerushalmi particularly, which may be all in some way confirming the different or many of the points that were made just now. Look with me on the screen. First of all, just to remind you from last go around, I hope it's big enough now. Yeah, is it big enough? Everyone good? Hit the chat button if it's not and tell me to make it even bigger, but I think this should be good, right? He's over here, David, bottom of the screen, Nahar Yarden. He crossed over the Jordan. We said he was coming from this area here, from Machanaim. This is approximately where he was, I believe. Machanaim is near the Nachal Yabok. He comes down here. Here's the valley. Obviously, it's green because it's lush. He crosses the Jordan River. He's on his way to Yerushalayim. That's where he lives, obvious. At some point, it sounds like, between here and here, crossing the Jordan and getting home, all of these other things are happening. And I particularly like that idea that whether or not it's related to what happened with Bathsheba at this point, and Uriah, he's still like off balance. The point is the news of the rebellion came before he even got back to the palace. He's still in transit, right? He's not stable. He's traveling. Tribe of Yehuda came and these other people said, why are you stealing him from us? He belongs to the whole nation. He's not a member of the party now. Yeah. The national committee, of so-and-so party, the Judean National Committee. No, he's now in charge of the whole country. He's from the United Shvatim of Israel, and you can't take him away. And the tribe of Yehuda is saying, he's from our tribe, et cetera, et cetera. And the back and forth that happens there. Then comes the news, oh yeah, Sheva ben Bichri has taken a group of people, whether they actually all literally went with him or not, I don't know, and went up to this place. This is going to be the center of the action a few minutes from now, Evel Beit Ma'acha. It's rather far north, yeah? The vicinity today of what we call Kiryat Shmona. Okay, look with me now on the right-hand side of the page. The Malbim. Vayikach HaMelech et Eser Nashim, Biru Chachamim Zichronim Livracha. In the Yerushalmi, we'll see that inside in a minute. These women, recall, were unwillingly, again, it's incredibly tragic, taken by the rebel, Avshalom, who engaged in a public act of licentiousness with them. He put a little tent up on a roof, and he called each one, 10 women went in to show I'm the king, I can use the things of the king. And the women here, I use that term advisedly, sadly, were no more than objects, sadly. And the point was, now they were forbidden to the king because someone else had been with them. Immediately when he got home, says the Malbim, that's why he did it immediately when he got home, even though he was chosen and he was anointed by the whole nation, which he was in Hebron. Hayalo din hedyot, he was still a commoner. They, the Jewish people, do not have the power. They do not have the capacity to decide we're changing the king. Therefore, this is what he will do to Sheva ben Bichri and to the rebels. Now, he's going to punish them as the rebels they are. According to the Malbim, sad, but this is the Malbim's view, the women were still being treated like objects. They were part of the national scene, and they were representative now as the symbols of that which a rebel took over. You know what happens to that, says David, the Malbim's view? They get put in 10 beautiful condos, and they're stuck, and they're prisoners, and they don't leave, and they don't go live their lives, and they don't get to be with me, and they're nothing now. But I'm going to keep them, and I'll take care of them. But that's what's going to happen. Amanut Chayut. Now, 2 points about this. Number one, this is the real story that we don't tell the Kinderlach about Esther Hamalka and all of those women who are going in and out of Achashverosh's palace, right? You remember? So he's trying to choose a queen. He's sampling. He's a terrible man. So that's how it works. But the point is, in antiquity, and I would venture to say right up until the end of monarchies, I'm sure there are still today where it still functions that way, but at least sort of in the Middle Ages, through the Renaissance, etc., and through to the pre-modern era. That's how it goes. If you are you're with the king, you cannot go to be a commoner anymore. It's too late. The Malbim, writing in the 19th century, such as he is, this is a national sign. And therefore, what's the first reaction of the king? Caught off guard by the rebels, these new rebels, and apparently a lot of people went with them, Shov and Bichr, etc. Listen, this is what's going to happen in the end. You're going to end up in a no man's land with nothing and nobody, and that's what happens. By the way, he doesn't put these women to death, so you could say there's some chesed over here, right? But at the same time, sadly, Vatiyana Tzurot Ad Yom Mutan Amanut Chayut. That's the Malbim's view. This was political, and therefore it fits right after hearing about the people going up north. Just so you know, it's not going to lead to anything except for you being stuck. By the by, it's interesting, but if you by this logic, you just carry it to the next step. Why doesn't he kill them? A, because it's no fault of their own, but B, the idea that when this rebellion is over, David will not wreak vengeance against all of these tribes who so easily, with such a degree of fickleness. So what can you say? They went after somebody else. You're triumphant king, come back after a terrible rebellion, and this is the thanks I get. You go follow somebody else just like that. But if David's symbol to the nation is, I'll crush you, I'll kill you, I'll destroy you, you'll never be forgiven it, so then why should the people ever go back to him? So at least to the Malbim's view, the point is, this is a sign for these rebels, and that's why this decision has to be taken immediately. Now look at the next view, which is actually the source. In the Talmud Yerushalmi, which may speak a little bit to some of which other people mention, like Karen and others. The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin says, "A nosin lo almanato v'lo grushato shomelach," and no one can marry the widow nor the divorcee of the king. Al shem v'tiyena tzurot ad yom mutan almanut chayot, because of our pasuk. Rav Yudah bar Pazi b'shem Rav Pazi b'shem Rabbi Yochanan melamed shehaya David mikalatan umekashtatan, that David took these 10 women and he had their hair braided. He sent them to the hair salon, they got their hair braided, and he got them all, he sent them to the hairdresser and then to the makeup artist. Umachnisan lefanav bechol yom. Oh, I'm sorry, this is also what Shelley said. It's Karen plus Shelley over here, right? He would every day bring them in front of him, to parade in front of him, all dressed to the nines. The Omer li Yitzra hara. He would say to his Yitzra's evil inclination, Ta'avta davar asr lach, you desired something which was forbidden to you. Chayacha shani mat'ivcha davar hamutar lach. I will starve you with something that's actually permitted to you. That's view number one in the Gemara. Number two, Rabbanan de Kisarin, the rabbis from Caesarea, Amarin, they say, the same Caesarea from today, that's the Caesarin, they say, Asuat mamish haya. They're definitely actually forbidden to him, for real. Umakli hedjot nishtamish bahen hedjot asalam malach lishtamish bo. And just as if there is a vessel that is for commoners, that was used by commoners, that's forbidden for the king to use it. Klisha melech nishtamish bahen hedjot. If there's a kli that belongs to the melech and a commoner used it, obviously that means that the king is forbidden from using that vessel. It's true of vessels, it's true of people too. Okay, two views. The Korban HaEdah, one of the commentators in the Yerushalmi, will see this, and I'll open up for questions, comments. Al Shem v'tiyenet tzurot, v'pilak shei David, sheba lihan Avshalom ktiv, that's the story there. V'yisal kadaitach shenosin grushato shomelech, havelomar leDavid hayalo leDavid legarshan, shlo tiyena agunot. If you hold that it's possible to marry the divorcees of the king, so the king should have divorced them so that they would not be agunot. Milamed, that's the point is, but the Gemara is trying to prove the fact that the king did not divorce them, he didn't want to keep them agunot stam, it's because they were really stuck. Then, Milamed Shaydav Mikalatan, Michtiv Tsurot. What does Tsurot means? Bound up. So what does he mean, bound them up? He braided their hair, right? So that's what it is. Kedar Shakelahu Nasa Mitzura Seorot. And this is his dialogue with his own Yetzer Hara. I'll starve you. They're not really, according to this view, they were not forbidden to David because Avshalom had been with them. Why? Because the reality is Avshalom raped them. And they were compelled. And therefore, they're not really forbidden to the king. But why didn't he go back to be with them? He wanted to David wanted to compel his own Yetzer, as opposed to Asurot Mamashayu, literally, Sha'af Shalanesim Mishum Shnitmeu, even though they weren't forbidden, Mikol Makom Logar Mitash Mishhedyot. They're not worse than the usage by a commoner. By this reading, first of all, Shelley, Baruch Shekivant, this little thing over here, this would happen, is exactly related, in David's mind, at least according to one of the opinions, to what happened originally with Bathsheba. He's still thinking about it. He's still playing it out. And Karen, to your point about trying to fix something, because we were all scratching our heads trying to figure out, he left him there, and now he's back. So at least he wants to take care of these people to show that he's not ignoring them and throwing them out completely. He's going to sustain them. Yeah, he wants to fix something that happened before, trying to make some kind of redress. Right? We're still left curious and puzzled. How could this be? But okay, who wanted to speak? Helen, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm off.
Oh, so mute your phone if you don't mind. I'll mute you. Okay, yeah. Thanks for muting. Okay. Anybody else? Can we move on in the story? But it just shows you, I mean, at least one of these opinions in Chazal wants to frame this and shape it for us in our mind's eye is unbelievably David, and again, we could argue till the cows come home, what is he using them for his pageantry? So he has his own Yetzer Hara, so they have to be stuck? Okay, good question. But the point is, here's a man who, contra the terrible slurs raised against him by largely people who have no business raising slurs against him, contra those disgusting comments about David Malka Mashiach. Here, David HaMelech as the great Baal Tshuva, after all of this has happened, after he could number on his fingers already, 4 times I was going to be punished. So the baby died. So my daughter was assaulted. So my son was killed. So my son rebelled. 4. I'm done. I got penance. Ribono Shel Now it's for sure okay, right? Now it's for sure okay. No. So the Gemara, at least one of the memrot is, these women, I know they're mutter to me. I'm not, whatever it was, Ribono Shel now I have the test. I have the test tenfold, because really these people are permitted to me, unlike what happened with the original sins. Yeah.
Do you think
Debbie, go ahead.
Do you think in some way, since Avshalom was his son, that it was like a double tshuva for him to take care of these women, quote unquote, because he's also taking the responsibility not only for his own action, but for perhaps having passed that down to Avshalom.
What he did. Mm-hmm. Which I'm waiting for someone to chime in is, well, there we go. He's trying to clean up the mess that his kid made.
Rabbi?
I knew you were going to say it. Shelley, go ahead.
I can't help but think, I guess I'm the one that's the hardest on David. He's not doing the correct thing, just like he's not going to be doing the correct thing with Amasa.
Wait for Amasa. We didn't get there yet.
Okay, he may be trying to rectify what he did, but the way he does it causes more problems than the way it was left. And when you went earlier, the business with Yeravam and Rechavam, that's not the same thing, because God tells Shlomo that 10 tribes are going to be taken from you. So Yeravam has a right to the kingdom.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Right to the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, table that part. Leave it for Sefer Malachim. Yeah, you're right. Wait for Sefer Malachim. They're not exactly the same. Today I was just trying to show that when the rallying cry came at the point of the split to 2 countries, two kingdoms, kingdom of Yisrael and kingdom of Yehuda, the rallying cry was the same language that had been used a generation or 2 earlier by Sheva ben Bichri. It was exactly the same slogan. So people understood, oh yeah, well, it's that. Now it didn't play out the same way. You're right, and it didn't have the exact same circumstance. But my point was just that the seeds of it are already sown and are simmering, like the pot is simmering on the stove. Here's another flare up, yeah? Let's move to the next part of the story so we make a little more headway in this parak.
Can I just give one little thing?
Please.
There's a thing, if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. When Nosson Hanavi told him the story of the lamb, he became a much more prodigal son. And with all the proportion and due respect, I think there's much more to his decision with these Pilakshim than they're saying. I cannot believe after Nosson Hanavi changed him that he would be that callous. It just doesn't ring true.
And in that regard, two things. One, as part of his tshuva with Bathsheba, and there isn't proof in the text other than the case of the Pilak, did he make a decision to be celibate? He did
Generally, not?
No. I'm not arguing with you. What do you base that on?
When we get to the beginning of Sefer Malachim, it will become apparent.
Okay, all right. But the other thing is, I'm trying to judge the Kav Zchut. If he did give the women a Gitin, what would their lot have been? They would have gotten their ksuba gelt. Who would marry them?
Fair point. Fair point.
And what he's done, and we cannot judge things by our society and mores of today.
That's what I was going to say.
Totally, totally.
A woman was a chattel.
Yeah.
And they're now being given support. They're being left in homes where they had lived before. That's not a bad lot.
That's what I was trying to say, but you just said it much more precisely. But that's the Nakuda.
Accident.
You judge it by 21st century standards. You say, I understand they didn't get married again. They were stuck. It's so terrible. It's true. There's a human tragedy component, but based on what they were up to then, it makes sense that actually, that's what I was trying to say. But Chal Kalei means he agreed to take care of them.
They could be running for vice president.
Let's move on.
So, Rabbi, one quick.
Yeah, Karen, please.
I mean, you look at David, women and his sons are an ongoing problem. So a piece in my mind is just saying, better just push them away between Tamar that started this whole thing going on. Now we've got this with Avshalom. Just put them somewhere else. I don't want any.
Sad. Yeah. Let's move on a little bit. Look with me on the screen, the Radak, where David HaMelech, the king had said to Amasa, Vata po amod, what did you stand? Radak says, Klamash teshuvi mahem v'da'ato hayalim nato sar tzava k'moshe ya'adlo, that the idea of Vata po amod is when you, Amasa, return, having mustered the troops, I will formally invest you as the chief of staff, as I told you I would do. In a certain way, what Amasa was told is, when I get home, we're going to make a ceremony. I'm going to sign a proclamation, and everyone's going to stand next to me, and we're going to shake your hand and whatever else. But until then, I need one thing from you because time is of the essence. Go do this. Get the people together. Prove yourself. Now, Usheshama Yoav, says the Radak, Kana badavar leficha harago. When Yoav heard this, that the king had appointed someone else for this job, he got very angry. He was very jealous. And he decided that he would find a way to kill Amasa. Now in Pasuk Hey, Ushera'a David, Shelo ba, when he saw that he did not arrive, Amasa did not come back in time, Amar la Avishai, Sheyirdof acharei Sheva ben Bichri, Velo Amar liYoav, and he didn't say to Yoav, you command the troops. Instead, he sent Avishai. Why? Ki b'libo hayala hasiro, because David was already thinking, I'm about to fire Yoav. I'm not giving him another a check mark on his scorecard that he's the one who saved us. No way. Shlo yiyeh sar tzva'o. You know why he didn't want him to be the Sar Tzava anymore? Mipnei sheharag Avshalom. He killed Avshalom, and he wasn't going to abide his the killer of Avshalom to be an individual who was now going to get off scot-free and retain his post. He needed to do something to move on. So I mentioned before, it's killing two birds with one stone. One of the aspects was, let's bind up the wounds of the nation by having this man, Amasa, become my chief of staff and prove his loyalty to the crown and signal to everybody else, the war is over, lay down your arms. Even the chief of staff from the rebels from the last rebellion really kept everyone together. Number two, goodbye, Yoav. I'm done with the Bnei Tzeruya. But notice he's still relying on the Bnei Tzeruya. Look at Pasuk Hey, where we have this, right? Vayelech Amasa, he went, he didn't come. But Pasuk Vav, Vayomer David el Avishai, Ata Yere Lanu Sheva ben Bichri min Avshalom. Now things will be worse as a result of Sheva ben Bichri than they were with Avshalom. Why? Because now we're getting everyone together to this other location, and it's in the wake of that rebellion with Avshalom, and they're hopping mad, right? And Shelley, thanks for pointing out, Avishai is the brother of Yoav. Exactly, couldn't get away from the Bnei Tzeruya. They were fine military strategists, so he went with them again. Now, what do we have here? Ata, you, kach et avdei adonecha, urodof acharav, pen matzah lo arim b'tzurot v'itzil einenu. Don't let him get away. He's going to have now an opportunity to put himself in a way where he'll be stuck, and when he's stuck there, i.e., in a fortress, or dug in, we won't be able to take care of him anymore. We won't be able to get rid of him. We'll be stuck with Sheva Bichri setting up a second kingdom. And as Shelley has already preemptively pointed out, Pasuk Zion, who followed? Who went with Avishai? Vayetzu acharav anshe Yoav, Yoav's men. Now, why Yoav's men, not Avishai's men? Yoav is chief of staff, so he has his people. Vakreti vapleti, that's sort of the honor guard. They're the inner circle of crack troops. V'chol giburim, they all went. Vayetzu Yerushalayim lirdof achrei Sheva ben Bichri, and they went to chase after Sheva ben Bichri. But I want to point out, it's not just the technicality that these were Yoav's men because he was chief of staff. It's that there were people who swore their allegiance to Yoav ben Tzeruya. And he couldn't just be simply easily fired, as we'll see. It's not so easy, right? And therefore Avishai is being sent. But David is trying to wean the nation away, or at least the loyalists, away from relying on Yoav ben Tzeruya. Hem im ha'evan ha'gedolah asher begiv'on v'masa ba lifnehem v'yoav chagur mido levusho ve'alav chagor cherev mitzumedet al motnav b'ta'arav hu yatsa vatipol. It's a very long pasuk with a lot of pieces of information of what's happening. What do we see here? They are at some kind of a large stone, which is in Giv'on. Recall, where is Giv'on? You could look up with me on the map. Giv'on is just north of Yerushalayim, right? And here in Pasuk, here down below, we have, back in the Navi, we have that's where they came to that place. Amasa showed up there, already a little north of Yerushalayim. And Yoav, it tells you, is dressed and what he's wearing. Now, this is for two reasons. One of those reasons is technically to describe the fact that he had some kind of a blade that was unlike the way that swords are usually placed on the belt. This was some kind of a sword which was flush up against his hips in the folds of the garment. This is going to be germane for what's going to happen next for those who read ahead. It's something that can fall out of the garment very, very easily. Look with me at the Malbim. On this pasuk, the Malbim explains the background about why the fact of he's wearing a particular tunic matters. It wasn't about the technicality of how the blade fit into it. It was about the status that it represented. Haya lasar tzava lavush miusad. The chief of staff had a particular type of clothing. I don't know if this should be miusad or miyuchad. I think it really is miyuchad. Shebo ikiru kulam ki hu berosh everyone would see he's the chief of staff. Ubo haya Yoav lavush. That's how Yoav was dressed. Ki eden means he still lo hisiro David misrarato. He didn't take him away from his authority. Ukvar biyanu already explained. Shem lavush ba lavush hamiyuchad le'ezer davar kamo, like in the book of Esther. Lavush malchut. Lavush malchut means it was the royal raiments. So it's not a particular type of royal raiments, it's the royal raiments. So lavusha mido lavusho, he's still wearing this tunic and this way of dress that show that he was in charge. And the highlighting of this, says the Malvin, is not just to tell you, by the way, there's a hidden blade, but to accentuate the fact that he's ready for action. Now look with me in the next psukim. We get to the next section. And that is Pasuk Tet, Vayomer Yoav la'amasa hashalom ta'achi. In English, how are you doing, bro? Vatoches yad yamin Yoav bizkan amasa lina shoklo. Yoav somehow grabbed onto the beard of Amasa. He gripped the beard with his right hand in order to give him a kiss. Amasa lo nishmar b'cherev asher biyad Yoav vayakehuva el hachomesh vayishpoch me'av arza v'lo shana lo vayamot. He killed him, and it describes very graphically how he killed him. He said to him, "How are you, brother?" And then as he leaned in as if he was going to give him a kiss, and he gripped his beard so he couldn't move with his right hand, he gripped his beard. Yoav, presumably with his left hand, stabbed him to death, and describes specifically that I think the word would be he disemboweled him. He caused his innards to flow out onto the ground. Yeah? He didn't even have to hit him a second time. And he died. And the same pasuk goes on. V'Yoav Avishai Achiv. Now Yoav is in the mix. Yoav is in the rush up together. Radaf, as if they were one man. Acharei Sheva ben Bichri, after Sheva ben Bichri. Right? And this is really incredible and correct. Amasa and Yoav are actually cousins. They're related to each other. Yoav is ben Tzeruya, and Amasa is ben Avigail, two sisters of David HaMelech. The first cousins are literally killing each other. V'yishamar alav minare Yoav vayomer mi asher chafetz b'Yoav u'mi asher leDavid acharei Yoav. I'd like to point out that the shift here, David sent Avishai, and who speaks up? Yoav's man. And who does he call them to be loyal to? Look at the order. Look at the order, right? First Yoav. Who wants to be with Yoav? And who's with David? Follow Yoav. Putting him up there. Very sad, tragic, and incredibly graphic and disgusting. V'amasami golel badam b'tocham sila vayar ha'ish ki amad kol ha'am vayasev et amasa minam sila sadeh vayashleich alav beged kasher ra'a kol haba alav ve'amad. He was drawing too much attention to himself. I mean, it was not his fault. He was dead, but he's bleeding, and he's on the road, on the path. So what do? They push him aside and they cover his body so that they won't exacerbate or remind everyone about the reality of just how terrible this whole episode was. Yeah, they killed him, and then they want to push on. But the Navi wants you to know the detail. It's not a detail. That he lies dead before them. Give me 2 more minutes. I want to show you something inside. First of all, that the Gemara itself, Masechet Sanhedrin, notes he had no idea that it was coming. Rav says, Shelo chashado, he had no reason to suspect him. None. And he just came out of nowhere and he killed him. Now, later on, and I won't go into all the details of how this happened, but Yoav ben Tzeruya, according to the Gemara, was put on trial. David will already be out of the world, but Shlomo and his people and Benayahu will put him on trial. Here's the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin about Yoav's trial. At Yual Yoav Dainei. They brought Yoav in front of the Sanhedrin at Golden Yerushalayim before they killed him, and they judged him. So they said, "Why did you kill Avner? Don't you remember Avner ben Ner was the chief of staff of, remember, Shaul. And Shaul died, and
And
Avner ben
Shaul.
Ner kept on going. He was still around.
Right, then
Avner
he
ben Ner was
becomes the
working with
son.
Ishbosheth. He was the chief of staff for Ishbosheth, really. And Avner ben Ner wanted to make peace. And he got into, because first he got into a little, more than a little tiff with Ishbosheth. He left. He went to David. He wanted to forge an alliance. David thought this was wonderful. Yoav did not. Yoav killed him in Hebron. He stabbed him to death. Same thing, where he asked him a shaila, and he looked down and he killed him. So, said Yoav in his defense, I was a Goel Hadam of my brother, Asael. Asael had been chasing Avner. And in the end, Avner told Asael, stop, or I'm going to have to kill you. And Asael did not stop. And Avner ended up killing Asael. It's not clear if he was trying to kill him or he did kill him deliberately, but he killed him. And now Yoav said, well, I was avenging my brother's blood. Because later on, just because Avner joined David's kingdom, didn't mean that Yoav was going to take it lightly. My brother Asael was killed by him. The court said to him, either Shlomo Melech or Benayahu, depending who you ask, Asael Rodef Hava. He was a Rodef. Asael was chasing after Avner. Avner was justified to kill him. By the way, you want to give a nice Dvar Torah about the use of excessive force? Here you have it. Yoav said back to him, he should have used something that he could have incapacitated him, but instead he went right away to kill him. Amale lo yachile. The response was, there was no choice. It was in the middle of the pursuit. He didn't have a choice. Answered Yoav, really? Hashta bedofen chamishit. He hit him, he stabbed him, actually with the back of a spear, into his fifth rib. So under the rib cage, by the fifth rib, right near the very sensitive areas, the gallbladder, the liver, etc. He aimed to the fifth rib. It says so. That's where he killed him. From Yochanan Bedofen Chamishit, the Makam Shmira Shemara, the Kaved Tluyin Bo. The gallbladder, the liver are right there. He couldn't get him in any of his. He had no other way to kill him, says Yoav. And the fact that he used lethal force when we didn't have to use lethal force, says Yoav, justified the fact that Yoav avenged my brother's blood, who was killed unjustly. The court relents. Amar le Nazel Avner. Avner, we relent. My time katalte lamasa. But why did you kill Amasa? He answered, Amasa morid b'malchut hava. He was a rebel. Now, what does that mean? He was a rebel. He was the chief of staff of Avshalom. No, the Gemara clarifies that's not what it means. It means that he was catching him on a technicality. What was the technicality? He didn't show up in time. You bring him here for 3 days. 3 days, get all the people. And what happened? Amasa went to go get them, and he came late. He didn't show up at the exact time that was appointed. The court said to Yoav, you know what happened? Amasa achin verakin darash. Amasa was a man who knew how to interpret the word ach and the word rak when it appears in a pasuk in Tanakh. What happened? The court fills in for Yoav. When he got to the tribe of Yehuda, this is not pshat. This is on the level of medrash, filling in the story. Askechinu the patiach luv masachta. He saw that the people of Yehuda were sitting and learning Torah. Amar, he said, K'tiv, it says, Kol ish asher yamre et picha v'lo yishama et dvarecha l'chol asher titzavenu yumat. So, any person, Yoshua is told by Hashem, who will go against your word, who will rebel against you, will not listen to what you say, whatever you command them, that person will die. Yachol afilu divrei Torah. Is that true also for learning issues, for Torah matters, for mitzvahs? Talmud Lomar. Therefore, the end of that pasuk is rak chazak ve'ematz. Yet, you should be strong and of good courage. Meaning, there's a limitation on this otherwise sweeping power. And this is on the level of medrash. Why isn't it in the text of the Nach? We've had this question many times. In this context, I think it does have to do with the fact that Yoav was seeing, all people saw that he didn't show up, whatever the reason was. But here the court at least says to Yoav, you know why he didn't show up? Because there is actually, get this, a higher law than the law of the king. And you, Yoav, are always so stuck in carrying out the law of the king, i.e., upholding his honor even more than he wants to, doing things more than he wants them done, killing people because you say so. But on this one, if you would have just sat for a minute and realized there's actually a reason why he didn't show up, you might have given him a pass. But nope, the Ben Suri family will take him down. Says the Rambam, which of course, in the base Medrash in the tribe of Yehuda, I don't think they were learning Rambam at this time, but at least we should see, since we're here already. If a person nullifies the decree of the king because they're engaged in mitzvahs, I feel a mitzvah kala, even if it's a simple mitzvah, a light mitzvah, harei pater. They're exempt. Why? Divrei harav, divrei ha'eved, divrei harav kodmin. If it has to do with the words of the master and the words of the servant, so we listen to the words of the master. Who's that? Hashem. Of course, if the king commanded to destroy, nullify, cancel a mitzvah, of course we don't listen to the king either. In that case, Kesef Mishnah says this is learned from our Gemara. Okay, fine. And here, Umasha Katav Afilu Mitzvah Kala Mehacha Nami Nafik Demai Talmud Torah Kol Divrei Torah B'Mashma. Since the story is that they would have to bottle their learning, have to no longer learn Torah in order to go out and do the king's bidding, we see that means that anything in Torah that must be true, even a mitzvah kala, that's how it's playing out. Okay, I see I'm already over time. Give me one more minute just to fill out this picture and give you a Dvar Torah for Parshat Lech Lecha in the strangest way. We learned the Gemara together about what happened on the day that Shaul started asking questions. Who's that young lad who's taken down the giant Goliath? So there's a whole back and forth. And Doeg raises the question, if you're going to ask questions about what family's from, why don't you ask if he's even allowed to be a Jew? Why? He's descended of Ruth HaMoaviyah. The Torah says that people from Moab and Ammon may not enter the nation. And the Gemara, as we know, eventually learns it's only the male members of those nations, not the females, that the Gemara darshans out. But at least there's a back and forth, going back and forth in the base medrash, if you will. And when the question was asked, halacha amarle halacha nit alma mimcha tseu shal beit midrash. If you Shaul can't answer, why don't you go to the base medrash? We'll ask. So they asked Amoni v'lo Amonit, Moavi v'lo Moavit. So Doeg had a million questions, and he was able to stump them. Ishtiku, they stayed quiet. They were about to make an announcement that David HaMelech, then David, Ben Yishai, and Yishai himself, the whole family, they're not really Jews, because they're not really allowed to convert to Judaism, and they descended of Ruth, maternal lineage. But no, what happened? They were about to make the announcement. Immediately then, V'amasa ben Ish Shmo Yitra Yisraeli Asher Ba'al Avigal Bat Nachash. It refers to Amasa. It gives you a pasuk about Amasa and tells you that he's the son of a man whose name is Yitra the Jew, the Israelite, who was married to Avigail, right? And Avigail is the daughter of Yishai. And her mother's name apparently was Nachash. Or maybe, as the Gemara says elsewhere, Nachash is actually Yishai, who's one of the few people who died because of the reality that human beings die, from the story of the Nachash. Not for now. That's a little off topic. But in another location, in Divrei Yamim, the same pasuk is described, tells you that the man's name is Yeter Yishmaeli. He's an Ishmaelite. So Amar Rava, Melamed, this teaches us that why was he called an Ishmaelite in the book of Chronicles and Divrei Yamim, and he's called the Israeli in the book of Samuel and Shmuel. Shechiger Charbok Yishmael. He put on his sword like Ishmael. And what did he say? Anyone who doesn't listen to this halacha will be stabbed with a sword. So I heard from the Beit Din of Shmuel from Ramah, Amoni v'lo Amonit, Moavi v'lo Moavit. The Gemara goes on, but he was the one, the father of Amasa was the one who justified for the Jewish people why it is that David and Yishai and the whole family were allowed to be descended from Ruth, and they were fully Jews. Look at that symmetry. This guy, Amasa, who was Nebuch killed over here by Yoav, actually it was because of his father, who was willing to put on a sword, if you will, and threaten violence in order to shore up that which was the received tradition from the Beit Din of Shmuel Haramati, and that received tradition was that it is actually to be darshaned Amoni, the male member of Ammon, and the male member of the Moavi may not enter the nation, but Ammonite and a Moavite may enter the nation. Last line for today, the Malbim. The Malbim points out in Divrei Yamim, who is Yeter Yishmaeli? Who Yitra Yisrael? It's the same person. Vigar be'eretz Yishmael. He lived in the land of Yishmael, so say Rashi and Radak. He lived, in other words, on the eastern bank of the Jordan. So that's why they call him that Ishmaelite, not because he was from that nation, but because he lived on the east bank of the Jordan. The Yesh Lomar, says the Malbim, Shaya Ger Yishmaeli. He was a convert to Judaism from the nation of the Ishmaelites. Va'acha Shinid Gayer, after he converted to Judaism, Shinu Shmo Miyeter Yitra. They changed his name from Yeter to Yitra. Just like, by the way, who else had a name Yeter, who had a letter added to his name? Yitro. In some places, he's called Yeter. So the Gemara says, the Chazal say in the Midrashim, Yeter, Yitro. He had a letter Vav added to his name when he became a Jew. There he was Yeter. This guy was Yeter also. And he changed his name to, when he became a Jew, they added a letter Aleph, like I guess one is Hashem, Aleph, right? And now they started coming to Karuhu Yisraeli. The Kachva Midrash Root, Huvabi Yalkut Shmuel Shnidgar V'Natan Lo Yishai Bito. Yishai said, I believe this man's sincerity as a convert to Judaism from the house of Yishmael. Therefore, I will give him, says Yishai, descendant of convert Ruth, I'll give him my daughter. My daughter, Abigail, will be married to him. The two of them got married, and their child is Amasa. If you hear this, if you hear all of this going on, if it's accurate, we see a certain symmetry. Now, Yoav ben Seruya killing Amasa, taking him down, right, is it makes it even worse. This was such an important family that they were the ones who affirmed that actually a convert should be accepted into the Jewish people from the nation of Moab, Ammon, etc. And now it turns out that from the Yishmaelites themselves came this person, Yeter, who said, I have a received tradition from the Beis Din that I learned from my Rebbe, from Shmuel Hanavi, which teaches us that actually Ruth was allowed to convert to Judaism, and everyone here is legitimate.
Rabbi?
Shall go ahead? Well, we've got to say goodbye, because we're way over
Going
time.
back to a couple of commentators up to the Gemara and the trial of Yoav. Yoav is got to fulfill the will of the king. Well, David didn't tell him to go after Shimi Habichri. He told Avishai. So why doesn't the guys Gemara in the Gemara from the trial say, tough luck? You did not obey what the king said, so how you can't do this argument?
Next time. Gotta wait for next time. Too complicated. Gotta wait for next time. Now I'll say something wild that I'm not sure I know what to do with myself. Rabbi Chaim Vital was the main student of the Arizal, the father of Lurianic Kabbalah, Yitzchak Luria. He has a parish on Chumash, and in that parish he claims that when Avram Avinu in Parshat Lech Lecha davens, Lu Yishmael Yichyeh Lefanecha, would that Yishmael will live before you. Chaim Vital says in the name of the Arizal that just like the same Avram Avinu went to Shechem, and Rashi says he davened for the Bnei Yaakov who were going to fight there, just like he went to the Ai and davened for the failure of Yoshua, maybe even unbeknownst to him. Maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't see it in prophecy, maybe he had some kind of idea, maybe not, but the idea that it's so prefigured, says the Arizal, quoted by Chaim Vital in this Perush, he was davening that there should be a person who should come from Yishmael who should bring a great rescue to the entire world. And who would that be? Yeter Yishmaeli. I submit that for your consideration. You can turn that over in your mind. But what that would mean, therefore, that the prayer was answered. Here came a ger, at least as far as the Malim is concerned, from Yishmael, who ended up being in the Beis Medrash that day, who put on a sword, threatened violence, but for positive ends. Look at the tragedy of Sefer Shmuel Perak Chaf, Shmuel Bet Perak Chaf, of what happens to Amasa over here. It's it's mind-boggling, and the disgusting violence, the way the violence is described so graphically, we'll pick up with next time, and we'll see. And to get I'll try to address Shelley's question next week, which is, of course, how could it be? Why didn't they say at his trial, you had no business being there in the first place? Instead, Yoav, there he comes in, he says he was a Mori b'Malchut, and they tell him he wasn't a Mori b'Malchut, he was in the base medrash. But in your mind, you just see black on white. He didn't listen to what the king said, and the most important thing is to listen to the king, assuming that Yoav really believes that and doesn't think that he wants to have someone else be the king, which we'll have to leave for next time. We're out of time for today.